Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 322, and I had a conversation with David Richman. David's sister died of brain cancer, and he's written a book called Cycles of Life, 15 People's Stories, 5,000 Miles, and a Journey Through the Emotional Chaos of Cancer. He interviewed 15 people across the United States whose lives had also been irrevocably changed by cancer, either as patients, survivors, loved ones, or caregivers. It was a powerful conversation and inspiring, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. Friend of the podcast, Vince, suggested that I recommend other episodes that are around this same topic. Check out episode 257, Barbara Kaplan-Bennett, The Cut is the Cure. Episode 256, Ben Ewing, Into That Good Night. Episode 248, Dr. Chris Kerr, Translating the Mystery of Death. Episode 185, Dr. Cami Fletcher, Homegoing and Death as Resistance. And episode 83, Dr. Donnie Stedman, Let the Truth of Our Bones Tell Our Stories. There is a trigger warning on this episode because we talk about death, and we talk about suicide and trauma and PTSD, and so I just want y'all to be aware of that for this episode. In other news, check out heyhumanpodcast.com to learn more about my guests and the show, susanruth.com to learn more about me, and please follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. And check out my new relationships and sex show with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman. It's on YouTube, and it's called Are We There Yet? You can find it at youtube.com/Are We There Yet podcast show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Stay safe, be well, be kind, and with the understanding that none of us know when our last day will be, please be love. All right, here we go. Hi.
Oh my goodness. Hi, nice to meet you.
How's it going?
Good. Are you hiding in your closet like me?
I am. When I moved to this new place, it's just a little attic. It's an attic converted into an apartment on a house, and it doesn't have its own little podcast room. So I just sit in my closet and throw up a blanket.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm in my closet as well.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of rooms in the house, but there's a lot of people running around, and it's just, this is the quietest one. Plus it's carpeted and with all these clothes, it just works.
It makes a huge difference.
It's bigger than the room I grew up in.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I just throw the blanket up and call it good. Whatever.
So great. I love it. I love
bare
it.
bones.
Nice.
Try to keep those costs down, right?
I know. Well, yeah, building a studio is kind of not cheap. And I'm sure like the cost of just doing the podcast itself is not cheap. It's not.
But it's a labor of love.
Yeah. And it's like writing books, I mean, they're not money makers, even though all the profit, all the money that comes in goes to charity. It's still not a ton.
Yeah.
Compared to the costs of printing and shipping and all of that other stuff. So
yeah, I feel like when one decides they're going to create something that's for the world and not for themselves, they have to sort of let go of the idea that it will be a money maker, but it's more about the energy of it, the action of it, the legacy, what it leaves behind, how it makes people think and feel.
Yeah. I have now a team of 3 people working with me, and the third one, she's just now listening to the audible of this latest book. And she's like, oh my God, you didn't tell me it was good. And I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about.
You didn't tell me I came to work for somebody that actually knows what they're doing.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. She goes, one of the stories, she goes, I think she said she's up to Terry. And she goes, and Terry's story almost made me cry.
Oh,
I said, oh yeah, well. It'll do.
I love it. Well, we're going to get into all of that. Firstly, David Richman, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you. I totally appreciate that, Susan. Thank you. I love the opportunity. I have a mother-in-law who sometimes is very direct And she goes, so you go on all these podcasts, you talk about the same thing every time. Don't you get bored? I go, well, I kind of don't talk about the same thing every time, but even if I did, no, I wouldn't get bored. This is like a passion I was drawn to, and I love it. And no, it's not tiring at all. It's not busy. I'm never too busy. I love it. And it's a great opportunity. And I love the stories that you bring. And the title is just so grabbing you, Hey Human. I love that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I mean, to be fair, every time any of us get interviewed, the person is going to ask different questions. It'll lead down different trains of thought.
Yeah.
So, it varies. I guess the core of things are the same, but it's not completely drill.
No, and I'm not trying to like be self-serving and talking to people. I really have a passion for what I think this project is doing for people. And I kind of don't lose sight of that, because I oftentimes, Susan, will get like an email from someone or, a note on a DM on a social app or something that'll be like, hey, I've been an oncologist for 20 years. I never knew what my patients were going through. Or I'm a critical care nurse. I had no idea. Or my grandmother just died and I didn't know what to say to my grandfather. My gosh, your book just totally helped me. And I love that. So what I set out to do with the book was to help people, guide them to start hard conversations around trauma. And that's what the book is doing. So why wouldn't I want to talk to everybody about it? Because it might help them. Because who doesn't experience trauma?
And it is interesting and frustrating, the disconnect sometimes between healthcare providers and patients. And also patients' sometimes inability to advocate for themselves and speak up for themselves, either out of fear of sounding stupid or not knowing something or feeling intimidated by just the experience at large. And they're already coming to the table with a certain amount of trauma, illness trauma, or what it all means, or life and death trauma, or who knows what else is going on around. And then stick them into a situation where they have to be their own voice, advocate for themselves, understand research, understand medicine, understand whatever ailment is afflicting them. That's a lot to ask.
It is. And that's a very important dynamic and perspective in the healthcare world, right? That doctor-patient thing and how difficult it is to navigate. But I'll go a step further and say that, we're all humans. And how about how difficult it is for some doctors, to go. I mean, I had this, one of the stories in the book is a 40-year oncologist. And I started speaking to her because I caught her at the right time in her life, where she said, I'm really grappling with when people don't take my advice or don't want to follow my care. It's really, really hard for me because I've lived such a full, wonderful life. And I know I'm good at what I do. I know I can make their cancer journey better. And if they don't follow my advice, I can't see them. It's really painful because I know what I'm doing and I can help them. And when they say, oh, well, I'll go try this or I'll go try that first, she goes, I think to myself what they might lose out on. And she said, I don't think people understand how difficult it is for me to walk from my examination room 1, where I've got a young mother with 2 kids who won't take my advice. And I know if she did, she's probably going to be cured. And if not, at least her life is going to be lengthened and enhanced. And I know I can do this. And she says, no, I'm going to go try a bunch of other things. And I got to walk out of patient room 1 and walk into exam room 2, two steps away. And I got a young woman with 2 kids in there. And I'm talking to her about end of life issues. She goes, this is really hard. Like, it's hard to deal with. So she's desperate for people to take her care. And it's like, it really makes you sit back and say, well, maybe I should ask my doctor how I'm doing. How they're doing rather. And how about also, you don't know what the doctor's going through. You just don't know what they're going through. Not on an emotional level, physical, financially, you have no idea what they're going through. So everybody's got it tough. And I think especially around traumatic things like cancer, what I learned through this project, you just don't know what people are going through. You just don't. Everybody's going through something or has gone through something. And we just don't often give ourselves a chance to find out and listen and, kind of feel them. Yeah, so there's a lot of dynamics. She picked on a good one for sure.
The doctors and surgeons that I know personally have a lot of stress. They're definitely pushed to the limits, and they're frustrated with the healthcare system as well, because they're fighting insurance companies who are pretending to be doctors, who are making calls and denying service and denying claims and playing with people's lives. And that has to be so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And that's a great point as well, Susan. I found and spoke to a chief medical officer for a major health plan and talked to him about his perspective from the corporate world. Like, how does a big health plan deal with the emotional side of the care and the trauma? And I love this guy's story because he's, one generation away from being a farm worker. And, without giving everything away, he found himself out of a horrible marriage. He had a special needs kid, very, very difficult financial situation. And he was digging in his couch for change, and to get enough gas to go pick up his paycheck so he can put food on the table. And so when he says he is really aware of the little guy and really wants to help people, he really means it, because he feels it. He's that close to it. And here he is, this major executive now at a major company, right? But he still thinks like, no, every single person that I know could be one or two bad situations from having to dig for change to put gas in their car to go pick up a paycheck. And he's like, I recognize that. I was that person. And so it's so wonderful to hear that there can be compassion and there can be humans behind some of these really, really cold, callous, difficult avenues we got to walk through in the healthcare industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's get into you. Tell me about your upbringing and your family life as a kid. Where are you from? How did you grow up?
Sure. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley area of Los Angeles. I had an interesting dynamic as a kid. My mom was way too young to have kids. She was 21 when I was born and definitely did not want kids. My sister was a little bit older than me, so she was even younger when my sister was born. My dad, on the other hand, was way too old to have kids. He was 59 when I was born. Yeah, big age difference. So, nearly a 40 years age difference between them. And so,
how in the world did they meet?
My dad was a entrepreneur, ran a big business, like self-made guy, very suave and debonair. I just think, she was running away and he was a place to land. And, it was just the times, the 1960, the young receptionist or whatever. I don't even really know everything behind it, but, yeah, I don't know, 56 and 18 when they got married. I don't know. It's a little wacky. So my sister and I kind of leaned on each other growing up because we had one parent that really was too old to take care of us and the other parent that really didn't want to take care of us. So we leaned into each other. At 18, I left home and embarked on the world on my own. Didn't make it very far. My car broke down in Vegas and I got robbed at gunpoint of everything that I had. Didn't have anybody to call, didn't have any money, kind of lived in my car for a while and kind of figured it out from there. It's a long story, but I went from one job to another. Eventually, never having gone to college, I was running $100+ million in revenue business for a major Wall Street firm and kind of had my life together. But I was also pretty emotionally, psychologically damaged. Maybe self-imposed, self-inflicted, some of it, but not really wise to the world, and found myself very comfortable in digging holes so that I could figure out a way out of them, or finding relationships with people that were wrecked so that I could fix them, and never worrying about my own stuff, So I found myself in my mid-30s, Susan, overweight. I was a super heavy smoker. I was married to an abusive alcoholic. I had 4-year-old twins, and I was at just like the lowest point that I could be relative to the rest of my life, which was going well, but I was just on a path to destruction. And my sister called me up at that time and said, "Hey, I've been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer." And I went, "Oh my gosh." And at the same time, I kind of had somebody explain to me that all these problems I was having in my life, it wasn't the problem. It was me. I was the problem. He's like, "Dude, you got to fix your own problems and not just complain about how bad everybody is or how bad your wife is or how hard it is or whatever. Like, work on your own problems." So at the same moment in time, I'm at this low point. Then I get some perspective hearing that my sister's going to die. And then I get some other perspective. I just heard the right words at the right time when somebody kind of convinced me, like, "Dude, you got to look in the mirror and figure your shit out and stop trying to fix the world that you can't fix. Like, you got to fix yourself because you're totally broken." And I'm like, whoa. So that's a long answer to my background, but that's kind of the starting point for, I think, what transformed me into the person I am today.
I'm curious how you went from living in your car to having that career path, because that seems like a mighty transition.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you don't have anybody to call. You don't have any money. I mean, what are you going to do? Right. I literally didn't have anywhere I didn't know what the heck to do. I didn't know. So the last job that I had before I left was at a restaurant. Previous to that, I worked at a fast food joint, and I walked into a fast food joint. It probably looked like crap. And I said, "Hey, I'd like to apply for a job." And I think the manager kind of laughed at me. And I said, No. Like really, I'd like to apply for a job. Here's the name and number of my old boss. If they're still working, they'll tell you I'm a good person and whatever. I just got robbed. I got nobody to call. I'm out on my own. So they kind of rolled their eyes. But this was back in, a time when maybe they would have believed you and not looked at me as some kind of, drug addicted, homeless punk or something. And so, they made a phone call and said, "Oh, go, so-and-so vouched for you. I guess you are a good guy. So come on in and we'll give you a try." So I worked at Jack in the Box, and then I worked at a hotel in Vegas, and then I worked at a restaurant. And then I just constantly learned how to manage and how to survive and how to work harder than the next person. And cause I had to. Had to. And so one thing led to another. And every time that I got into a new industry, I was the least qualified to be in that industry. So I tried to work like 10 times as hard as everyone to prove that I could be the best person in the room, which always led to other opportunities. But I always walked into a room going, okay, I got to be smarter and harder working than the other 99 people there because I'm the fraud. And so, so basically that's what I did. That landed me at, one job after another that was a better job. And eventually I'm, this big executive, medium level executive at a big firm. And, I'm still the only guy in the room without the college degree and working twice as hard as everyone because I think I'm a fraud,
Did you have substance abuse issues at all, or did you manage to?
No substance abuse issues. Didn't whatever. It's just I kind of started making money working harder rather than thinking along a path of if I go to school, I'm going to have to build this resume, I'm going to have this education, and I'm going to go along these steps or whatever. I just fell into work, first of all, because I had to. And then I'd work double shifts, and then I would get 2 jobs, and then I get 3 jobs, and I'd work 20 hours a day because I had to.
Was there a fostering of relationship between you and your parents? Given I know that you and your sister were quite tight, but did your parents ever come around?
No. So my mom and I think she was quietly glad that I left at 18 because basically 40 years later, nearly, I had not really heard from her ever again. So that's a whole nother situation. I can just chalk it up to some people just doesn't want kids. What are you going to do? At the time, times in my life, I've kind of been who has a kid and then just doesn't care. But some people just don't care, right? Don't you run into some people, Susan, where you're like, why is that person so angry? Some people are just angry. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it. They just are. Some people are bad people, right? Some people are good people. More people are good people than are bad.
I agree.
And my dad, he died when I was pretty young, in my very early 20s. But at that time, he's just really too old to really understand what was going on. He was an old, like an old 80, and had some medical issues. I just think he just didn't really know how to deal with a kid. I certainly didn't know how to deal with an old parent. And so I just found my way in the world by myself. And that created a lot of problems because I hadn't had guidance. I didn't have support. I didn't have anybody to turn to. I couldn't ask for help or mentorship, or nobody said, hey, here's a plan that you should follow in life, right? Or guide rails to a plan. Nothing like that. So it was just trial by fire, or however they call that, and so that's the thing that I got used to. And I think that it turned me into somebody who was always looking to get other people's approval and, like prove that I'm the smartest guy in the room, or prove that I can handle what other people that were prepared to handle could handle. But I wasn't prepared, but I could still be in the room and try to handle it. Which kind of just led to me having a very low self-esteem and a low self-care quotient. Didn't really care about myself, really tried hard to care about others, or at least I cared about what they thought, but I didn't care about what I thought. And I certainly didn't take care of myself. That changed when those things I told you happened. But yeah, there was no mentorship, parent, somebody trying to help you along life. And so it was really figuring a lot of stuff out by myself.
How did that light bulb really go off though? Because I think it's one thing to think, okay, I need to do better. I need to do better for myself, for my health. And then doing it, that's a whole other story. It's a different step.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that if you're fortunate, and I was fortunate, if you're fortunate to be able to, and I didn't know it at the time, but I know it since then, that if you're fortunate enough to, in my mind, take a three-step process. And that is, one, if you're fortunate enough to be at a place in your life where you can have an honest assessment of yourself. See, I think a lot of times people get to a certain age, sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 35 or whatever, but sometime in that time frame, they get to be, and that's who they are. And they just go, oh, I'm like this because that's who I am, or I'm like this, that's because who I am. And they kind of become myopic about who they are and like what they could be. And they just kind of settled into life, and they become kind of, already figured everything out. And I think if you're really fortunate that you can assess where you're at, and if you like it and be proud of it, then lean into it. And if you're not, then you can try to change it. But I don't think a lot of us take the opportunity or given the opportunity to take an honest assessment of yourself. And when I got the perspective of knowing that my sister, was on a path to death, and here I am, at the exact same time, kind of opening my eyes to maybe I should start to figure out who I'm going to be in life and who I am. And like I see my future ahead of me, and I'm just at the point where I can say, geez, dude, who's the guy in the mirror? And like, who is that person? And who does that person want to be? I'm like, what the hell? I'm allowed to ask myself these questions. I can go figure this out. And then against that, my sister's got terminal brain cancer, and she's got young family and kids and the whole thing. And she doesn't have that same ability. So gave me that perspective and the opportunity, I think, to give an assessment. And then I think just by luck, I came up with the second step for me, which was I just forgave myself. I just let my brain go and go, look, dude, you know what you know now. You didn't know it then. And you know what, if you want to keep making the same mistakes, go ahead, but stop. Like, you don't have to keep banging your head against the wall. And when you stop banging your head against the wall, you could just like not feel bad about it because you didn't know any better until just now. And so for me, it was that first thing of taking a real assessment of myself. Overweight, smoker, fixing everyone else, not paying attention to myself, kind of chip on my shoulder kind of guy, whatever. And then the second step was I just said, just let it go. Like, let it all go. Just forgive yourself. Like, some of it was your fault. A lot of it wasn't. Don't figure it out. Don't be cynical. Don't have a chip on your shoulder. Don't know the answer to every question. Don't just be what you are. Like, be who you want to become and figure it out. Like, just let it go. Free your mind. And I did. I let myself free my mind, because what's an overweight smoker doing, going to saying, oh, I'm going to go do an Ironman or something, or I'm going to go do 100-mile run, or, I just said, I'm going to go do stuff that's just for me. And it's like, I have to leave me in the past, just let it go. So that was step 2. Step 3 for me was just like leaning into learning about myself and about life. And that's kind of like that time in my life, it was like day 1 for me,
Mm.
Does that make any sense?
It absolutely does. And I love the idea of just deciding to be whomever it is you wish to be, and then you will become that, because the brain doesn't know the difference. If you're telling the brain, this is who I am, the brain goes, oh, okay, this is who we are. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it doesn't know that, when you're watching a scary movie, you're scared because the brain goes, this is scary. Doesn't really get the delineation between scary movie and scary real life.
Yeah.
It still produces the same feelings to some degree.
Yeah. And I'm not a big kind of like mantra guy or live by a bunch of quotes and that kind of stuff. I don't write a bunch of stuff on yellow stickies and, recite it while I'm brushing my teeth. I'm not that kind of guy, but there's a couple of like movies, like one specific quote just stuck with me in The Matrix when they're in the fighting scene, in the first fighting scene in The Matrix, and Lawrence Fishburne looks at Keanu Reeves at one point in the fight and he says, stop trying to hit me and hit me. Like, stop trying to hit me, just hit me. And I'm like, well, stop trying to be whatever you're trying to be and just be. And when I started not trying to be the smartest guy in the room and not trying to work harder than everybody else, and I just was like, I don't care what anybody else thinks but me. Now, I don't mean that like in a bad way. Like, I'm not going to be an a-hole because I don't care what anybody thinks, right? I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like, when I stopped paying attention to what, because people weren't giving me the time of day anyway. Well, that was all made up in my head, right? They were living their own lives, but I'm thinking, oh, they're gonna, I need their approval, or they're thinking this of me. They're not. They're living their own lives. But it took me a while to learn that. And so, yeah, that's a big point to get to. And I just was fortunate that I found it as early in life as I did.
That's magical. When your sister got her diagnosis, and it sounds like she was really a lifeline for you.
Mm-hmm.
That must have created all sorts of emotional roller coaster rides to take. And considering where you were coming from too, because if you're in this place of I need to get better and be better and figure out who I am and where I'm going, and then right next to you is this person who's like, oh, I see the last door to walk through.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a juxtaposition.
It is. And I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about death, or being afraid of death, or going through very traumatic things. It's all part of what this project's all about. And I think siblings have something, especially siblings that are close in age, or twins or something like that. My sister and I were like 16 months apart, so we're pretty close. And there's something about siblings close in age that they have the same history, the same perspective. They see, like, they grew up seeing the same things. If you have a brother that's 12 years older, yeah, he's your brother, but you didn't grow up seeing things the same. Your parents were different people. The experiences were different. The schools were different. There was, your siblings, but really close in age siblings kind of have that in common. And I didn't know it early on, but I really had to grieve that person from my childhood that I felt was pretty traumatic and pretty injurious. And it was really not a fun childhood most of the time. The one person that kind of got that was there with me, that was dealing with the kind of nonsense that I had to deal with, was dealing with it too. That person is going to be gone. And so that's like, wow, man, like when I want to complain about this or that, or I want to, commiserate with someone about how difficult it was, to navigate coming home at night when mom said, if you come home before dark, you're in big trouble. And if you come home after dark, you're in big trouble. And it's like, how do you navigate coming home at dark? Like, it's like, like the stress and the angst and the abuse that came out of that, and that person's gone, And so, I think after she died, I didn't just grieve her. I grieved that, the only person that knew that part of my childhood, and I knew, cause I knew that about her and her childhood, like that's gone. Like, that's it. You're alone.
The person that bears witness to your life.
Yeah. I mean, parents do, but it's a different thing, right?
Yeah, but they're coming from their own perspective. They do bear witness in some regard, but the person who is, especially in houses where abuse is taking place, emotional and or physical or both, that the sibling, I would argue it doesn't even matter if they're close in age or not, that even though they may be in their own bubble if they're too far apart, that they're still bearing witness. They're still aware of this thing going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you don't feel like you're crazy. Am I crazy because this is how it felt? Or am I actually really experiencing this thing? Especially if you live with a gaslighter, especially if the parent is gaslighting you the whole time.
And that's gone, right? And so that's a different thing to grieve. And I totally get that you can't compare one person's grief to another, and everybody's going through something. Everybody's had trauma, and there certainly isn't anything comparable between one person's loss and another, right? It's individual to them.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what are you grieving, and what, how does it affect you emotionally? And I think for me, the hardest part of losing her was that I had secretly been so proud of her for coming through our childhood so much better than I had, so much more at peace with herself and who she was. And she had a very functional and wonderful relationship with her husband, very close to her kids, huge circle of friends, very settled into who she was. She knew who she was, and she was living her best life. Like me, I'm in all this turmoil, and I'm carrying around all these, these problems from my childhood that made me create bigger problems for myself that I carried around as burdens. And I'm just like, I got to figure my life out. She figured out all that ahead of me, right? And was doing great. And I kind of admired that about her. And even at times even kept my distance from her, because I was so happy that she had this beautiful life, coming from where we came from. And so it was a little extra, punch to the gut, knowing that she was going to have to leave that behind. And her and I talked about that. She was just like, yeah, imagine where we came from and where I'm at. And it just sucks that I'm not going to be able to, see it through. And so, that was the burden she was carrying near the end of her life. And so, yeah, everybody has that. Everybody has something they're dealing with.
How did she feel about dying so young, especially?
Well, she had a happy marriage. She was not happy the fact that she was going to leave her husband, and less happy, I think, about the fact that she was not going to see her kids grow up, because she was very close to her kids, and she had 2 kids, and she was very close to them. And I remember one of the most serious conversations that we had was sitting on the porch. My 2 kids, her 2 kids, were bouncing around on a trampoline. And she said, yeah, I'm not going to ever see them ever at an age where they won't be trampolining, right? Like that, I'll never see past this time. And she goes, that's really sad, because she used to say to me, 2, 3, 4 years before that, oh my God, my kids are so perfect. I want to lock them up in a box. They don't grow. Right. And so now she's like, the only thing I want to do is be around to watch them grow. And that's not going to happen. So, yeah, she was very brave and very courageous and very accepting of her situation, stayed very positive. She was never mired in this kind of like pity me thing or anything like that. Nothing like it. She's very brave, very courageous, a very aggressively optimistic outlook about things. So that part of it was good for her, but she knew that it was a battle she couldn't win. And I think it was just sad for her because she really loved her family, you know.
I'm going to ask a question that might be a difficult one to answer, or maybe insulting in some way, but did you ever envy the fact that she was leaving?
No, I don't think so. And it's not that difficult question. I mean, it's a good question. No, I'll tell you what's really poignant for me is that if there is a silver lining around terminal disease, the silver lining is that it's possible for you to reconcile certain emotions and relationships and kind of navigate some of the really difficult things about end of life issues that come up, where as opposed to somebody that, let's say, tragically dies in an accident where you can't, you know, she was able to get all of her last conversations, sometimes many times. This might be my last conversation with you, conversations, which gave her the ability to talk. And I don't think I envy it. I think what I admire is that she did not hide from the fact that she was going to die. She didn't live her life because of that fact, but she kind of tapped out every relationship that she could. She kind of tapped out every emotion that she could because she was just real about it. And I admire that because that's some serious courage. And I envy that because wouldn't it be nice to know that I can say whatever the F I want because you know what? You don't like it. That's your problem. I'm dying. It's up to me. What the hell? Right. So
could you say that in life as well?
Yeah. I probably tread a little bit lighter. I don't want to, I don't want to upset the apple cart too much sometimes, but I do, again, there's a lot of people that would say there's no silver linings to losing somebody. But I think that, there are some bright spots that you could look at. And one of those things that I envy or admire is that she was able to be very honest and real and authentic and connecting with the people that she had in her life for many years. And her close friends were hurt, and her family was really hurt by her her leaving us. But nobody said like, oh, I wish we would have got more time, because the reality was they weren't going to get it, and they maximized it while they had it, which is a good thing. Which
is a lesson we could all learn, of course.
Right? Yeah.
Whatever conversation Absolutely. We're putting off, whatever thing we are not willing to say out of fear or self-loathing or whatever it is, that life really is quite short. None of us know how long the runway is.
Yeah. And even, Susan, during people's journeys or potential, life-ending journey with cancer especially, is it's really hard to have those difficult conversations, that emotional thing. Like it's easier for you to ask me as a stranger, really hard questions, but you might not have asked that question to your best friend as you're going through it. Like, how do you feel about dying? Because I don't want to ask my friend how she feels about dying. I want to be here to support her. And what if she doesn't want to die? And I'm asking her to, right. And we just filter ourselves because it's so hard. It's so hard to navigate these hard conversations. And I noticed that, while I was watching my sister go through this experience, that people were good about talking about the tasks. How do I get my kids watched? How do I pick up my kids from school? How do I navigate healthcare? How do I get more time off of work? These kind of things that we're good about. But most people are not really good about talking about these really hard emotional things that you're really good at on your podcast with, right? But in everyday life, it's not easy to have these hard conversations. It's just not. Like how do you start a hard conversation with somebody that you have some kind of 30-year dynamic with, where having that hard conversation it's just too hard. It's too big of a wall to climb. And so, that's that's kind of what I wanted to shine some light on, is that like, how can we make starting those hard conversations, asking those tougher questions like you ask, how can we make that not so hard?
I think the first step might be not worrying so much what the answer is, not hanging your hopes and dreams on whatever the answer is, that regardless of what the person says back to you, knowing that that's them, that it doesn't really have anything, it doesn't have to do with you. It has little to do with you at all. In fact, even if it seems like it's about you. I think
that's a very astute point. I mean, super astute, because it's hard not to frame it around our perspective or about us. And you're right. It's not about us. And I've come in the last several years to understand this concept of everybody's just living their life, and it's their life, and we're all just passerbyers in each other's lives. And so it's really not about us. But what it is, we make it about us when we ask a stupid question. We make it about us when we look at somebody with puppy dog eyes because we think they need sympathy or something. That's making it about us. Even we can care about others and make it about us. I think what I wanted to do was to get inside people's heads, to have an insight into that idea of what's it like to be them, right? Because we're living our lives. That's making it about us. What's it like to be them? And it's like, oh my goodness, that's what people go through. Like, that's the kind of things that people are dealing with. Like, then it can maybe free you up a little bit to realize it's not about you. Like, you don't ask questions because you want to look good. You ask questions because you want to learn, and you want to listen, or you want to give somebody the ability to think or say something or learn something profound for even a minute, right? You don't ask the question because you're like, oh, look at what a good question asker I am, right? That, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thank you, by the way, that was a nice compliment. Do you feel spirituality or a closeness to something bigger than yourself? And if you do, where does that fit with you, with the idea of dying, especially given all the people you've talked with who are at end of life?
I still am on a path to learn the answer to those questions. I don't think I know. I just don't. Several people I spoke to and wrote about in the book had stories that were very spiritual in nature. And a couple of them asked me those type of questions ahead of time. And when I didn't give them answers that made them comfortable, they were like, well, I can't really tell you my story because you're not going to believe me. Or I can't tell you my story because, you're not going to take this thing about my story seriously. And I'm like, oh, well, just try me out. So there are some stories that are unbelievably spiritual, like these cannot be coincidence type stories. And they're unbelievably profound and moving. And they make you want to believe that there is some type of greater connectivity, something on whatever other side is the other side, and that we're all connected across time and humanity. And I kind of I'm getting there, but I don't know that I know the answer. I just don't know that I know the answer, but I do know. Can I tell you a super quick story?
Please.
Okay. So, this is in the book. I talk about this, but what I'm going to tell you is something that you can't make up. Okay. You literally couldn't make this up. If I tried to elicit emotion out of someone, I couldn't make it up because I'd have to be like the smartest guy in the entire world. So, when my sister was near the end of her life, she called me up one day and she said, hey, I'm seeing ones everywhere. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you mean. She's like, well, it's, I look at the clock and it's 1:11 and I go, it's 2:00. She goes, no, just hear me out. I go, okay. She goes, I go on a bike ride and it's 11. I go 11 miles. And I go pick up Katie, my daughter, and they tell me that she's in room 111. And I look down at my heart rate and it's 111. And she goes, I don't know about these ones. It's like a guardian angel thing. Like maybe it's our dad because my dad died while they were on the phone together, and he died at 1:11 in the afternoon while he was on the phone with my sister. And so she's like, God. Yeah, she goes, and I don't know, like, I know it's probably stupid. We're not like really spiritual, like religious, whatever. But every time I see these ones, I think like maybe that's dad, like looking out for us, looking out for me anyway. And I'm like, that's a really nice thought. Like, I don't know if it's BS or not, but I like the thought. So she dies, and all of a sudden, like the kids, like next year, they go to I have twins, and they both are they're in the same class. It's in room 111. And I'm like, what the hell? And at this time, I'm an athlete now, and I'm doing races, and I'm doing, whatever. And I'll come home from a run, and I'll have run 11.1 miles, like not knowing it. Or we get out of come off the lake on the boat, and we look at the car, and it says it's 111 degrees out. And I'm like, what the hell? Right. So all these ones, and I'm thinking, all right, that's kind of cool. So I get a phone call from an employee. It's about 11 or 12 at night. I get a text from an employee. She goes, nice thing with your sister. Text. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And so I text her back, and I go, I'm not sure what you mean. She goes, yeah, that's a really cute little thing you pulled off. That's awesome. And I go, I don't know what you mean. And she goes, the stories with the ones? And I go, yeah, it's a true story. She goes, yeah, I know. She goes, where you finished that story. And I go, what? Now, if you ever written a book, you know that you write it, you rewrite it 100 times. You send it to the publisher. You send it to your editor. The editor rewrites it 100 times. You can send it back and forth. There's 30 different versions. Then you copyright it and copy edit it and make sure the punctuation's correct. And then you send it to the layout artist, and the layout guy's got to make sure that the paragraphs are on the right side of the page and the page numbers, blah, blah, blah. I flip open the book, and when I wrote about the story about June and the ones, it finished on page 111.
Oh my God. I'm
like, what the hell? I had no idea. And I picked up the phone. I called her. I'm like, what? She goes, you didn't know? I go, I had no idea. And hundreds and hundreds of people have read this book. Editors, publishers, pre-readers. Nobody ever noticed it. When final version, however many books I've sold, nobody's ever said, wow, it finished on page 111. Isn't that cute? I had no idea. So yeah, there's something going on out there.
Interesting.
Because June's story about the ones finished on page 111. How is that?
That's wild. Also, she was on the phone with your dad when he died.
Yeah, that's tough. And they were very close. They were very, very close. Yeah, he just died of a massive stroke. Just dropped the phone, and she was like, "Oh my goodness." So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awful.
And she always remembered that it was at 111. So anyway, so I know there's long answer to your question. I know there's something out there. I don't know exactly what it is. And I don't in the book try to give answers or prescriptions or, think this way or whatever. So if I did have an answer to that, I might not have written about it, but The
thing about it doesn't matter. You don't have to know. None of us do. None of us have to know, and not knowing is still okay.
Yeah.
There are some mysteries that get to stay mysteries. It doesn't make us less than or worse people or better or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the thrill of being.
It is a thrill. A thrill is a good word, because I'm thinking of this one guy. I wouldn't quite call him a friend, Susan, but I know him pretty well. And I know that he's not a BSer, right? He doesn't make stuff up. And he's certainly not a touchy-feely emotional guy. Okay. But he likes to tell the story. I'm not a religious guy. I don't believe in the afterlife. It's like, that's just not my thing. He goes, and then I had a widowmaker, a massive heart attack, and I was I was dead for 8 minutes, and they resuscitated me. And he says, I need to let you know, there is another side. We are literally, I saw it. We're all connected across time and humanity. If we're all connected by an innumerable amount of strings, every little thing is connected to every other living thing. And it's just, he goes, I just know it. Like I saw it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you you're crazy, but you saw it. He's not a guy that would say that if he didn't mean it.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that he believed that when he didn't believe in that beforehand.
Yes.
It'd be one thing to believe in that wholeheartedly and then experience that. but to not believe it wholeheartedly and experience it, that's something altogether.
Yeah. And to not be preachy about it. And he doesn't go out and wear it on his sleeve. It's just, if he gets asked a question, he'll answer it with like, I don't even, it's not even a remote possibility. It doesn't exist. We are all connected. It's all going to be okay. I'm definitely not afraid to die. In fact, I might at one point look forward to it.
Yeah. Interesting. I love that.
Cool, right?
Tell me about Cycle of Lives and how that came to be.
So near the end of June's life, she said there's this a 24-hour relay for life going on in her honor, and a team of people that came together and are going to do this relay for life for her. And she goes, I'm not doing well, but I'd like to be out there for the whole 24 hours. Put me on a lounge chair and let me cheer people on. I said, Al, if you can do it, I'll run for the whole 24 hours. Because at this time I've become an endurance athlete. I've done, Ironmans and 24-hour runs and all that kind of stuff. So I said, I'll run for the whole 24 hours. She said, deal. And unfortunately she died 2 days before the event. So she couldn't, go see them, but I did. And I ran the whole 24 hours, and I just watched people, and I saw them interacting with each other. I saw them on really quiet, introspective laps, walking around the track, and I just came up with this idea that everybody I saw had some kind of hesitancy, isolation, self-isolation, abandonment. It was just a quieter, darker place when it was the emotional things on the table or that they were dealing with. The remembrance lap is in the dark. It's like everything's kind of quiet and self-contained when it's on the emotional side. But when it came to education and, resources, we'll talk about that all day. And so I thought, what can we learn from that? And so I found, it took me a while, but I found a ton of different people, all different ages, all different types of cancer, all different perspectives. Like one was an oncologist, just like I mentioned, a medical professional, a neonatal intensive care nurse, you name it. A survivor, loved one, had cancer, one and done, had cancer 5 times in their adult life. I wanted just a wide range of people. And then I wanted to find people that were super fascinating, totally evocative with regard to the traumas that affected their lives. And so I wanted to say, hey, I might be able to identify with your trauma in your childhood or young adulthood, because who doesn't have trauma? And how did that trauma affect your ability, or more likely your inability, to bring others into that quiet space when you're contemplating the emotional side? And so if I could say that point A is when you encountered cancer, either as a 8th grader on a field trip to a hospital where you said, I'm going to become a doctor, or, as an adult when you got diagnosed with cancer for the first time. Point A, that's point A. Point B is today. How are you able to or unable to navigate the emotional side of your trauma from point A to point B in relation to all the trauma that happened before? And I thought to myself, if I could understand if I could have a little bit of insight into what you and I talked about earlier, that you never know what people are going through. Everybody's dealing with shit. They're living their lives, right? And we can't begin to understand what they're going through or what they have gone through. So if we can gain a little insight into that pre-point A, then when they're going through that A to B journey, whatever it is, maybe we can have a way to relate to them a little bit better, ask better questions, listen better, just be there for them in a different way, because we can understand, when you ask a friend and you say, hey, Susan, you look a little down, like there's something going on. Can you tell me? And you go, no, I'm fine. And I go, no, are you sure? And you go, yeah, no, look at David, I'm fine. Like I'm good. It's just I'm just dealing with a lot. I got a lot on my plate. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Well, are you telling me that because you're fine? Or are you telling me that because maybe you don't want to bring me down? Or are you telling me that because you don't want to burden me? Or do you think that if you open up to me, that I might abandon you? And I might say, gosh, dang it, why'd you have to keep talking? Because I shouldn't ask you that stupid question, because now you're giving me all your problems. There's all this stuff going on, right? And so I wanted to give people and learn myself a little bit of insight into that. How does trauma affect your ability to navigate those hard conversations? And so I interviewed people for a couple of years. got super, super deep into their stories. Every single one, multiple times along the process, said, I never really talked to anybody about it, but okay, I'll talk about X. And if people weren't able to go there with me, then they went to the wayside. Sometimes I wasn't a good enough question asker. So, it didn't work. Sometimes it was the wrong time for either them or me or whatever. But there were a number of stories where they were just raw, dramatic, inspiring, moving, evocative, just fascinating people who I was able to catch the essence of them and their experience and just to shine a light on what people go through. So they're just very dramatic stories, not so much dramatic in eliciting harsh emotion or depressing or anything like that, not dramatic like that, but just they're very, really capturing the essence, I think, of people's trauma and how that affects their ability to navigate hard conversations while they're going through something like cancer.
What did that teach you about yourself?
We got to do part 2 of the show. Because, I learned a lot. I mean, I really did learn a lot. I probably came to a lot of conversations, even difficult ones, knowing stuff. And I had to unknow everything because I don't know anything. I have no idea what somebody's going through. I have no idea what the right thing to say is. I have no idea. I have no idea what they need. Right. And I used to think like I do. Or that I would assume because you're a certain person with a certain dynamic that you never dealt with X or you don't know how to deal with X. That's wrong. So I kind of tried. I really do try every day to not assume to know what I think I know. Now, let me tell you another story. So when I was working at a major Wall Street firm, this was during the financial crisis, and it was a really, really rough patch. And we had a guy who was the last person you would ever think was in trouble. And he was in some whatever kind of trouble and jumped off the building. Young family, the whole thing. It's just absolutely tragic, completely tragic. And I went from one advisor's office to the next advisor's office, and I closed the door. I want to give them a safe space to talk about it because we couldn't get a grief counselor in there like till the next day. So I just walked around and talked to every single person, Susan, every single one, people that I had known from going to their wedding or inviting them to a barbecue or watching their kids on vacation or whatever. Every single one of them had a this close to them experience with suicide, a parent, a friend, a childhood friend, a family member, something. And I'm just like, what the hell? I couldn't even imagine people were dealing with that kind of thing on a regular basis. And then it made me think, hell, the next door, when I grew up, the dad invited the family in on Christmas Day to open up presents and killed himself in front of them. It's like, what the hell? And I didn't know, nobody knew that about me. I didn't know that about anybody else. Like, how would I know that people are dealing with that kind of trauma? And it's like, wow. So very long answer to your question, but that's one of the things I learned about myself is that you can't come to think that you know anything about anybody because you really don't. That's number one. Number two, don't think to know what they need, which also gives you the ability to not be afraid to ask questions, even harsh ones, hard ones, even private ones. Because if you ask it from a place of caring and you're doing it for the right reasons, then maybe potentially you could get the right answer, like what they need or what they don't need, but they just want to talk about or whatever.
And understand that whatever their answer is in that moment may change the next day or the next hour.
Right. But if you could be there and be present, give people a safe space and not put what you think they need or what you think they're feeling into them, because it's not about you. Right. So I learned that. I really did learn that there's way more behind trite little sayings that you don't want to, that I don't want to post on my little yellow stickies and read while I'm brushing my teeth. There's way more to those in real life than we have any idea. And almost every one of the book participants had something in their life that I would have rolled my eyes at if you would have told me. Yeah, like this one woman. So in the beginning of her story, I knew a little bit about her life. This cancers and some other things, whatever. And I started talking to her, and she was kind of distant and cold or whatever. And I said, so what's your outtake on life? And she goes, I just kind of do my best to get up out of bed, put my feet on the ground, and go about my day. And I'm just like, come on, man, give me more than that. I'm rolling my eyes. To myself, right? I'm just thinking, come on, I can put that on a yellow sticky, but that doesn't help me. So I'm talking to her, and I realized that, holy crap, this woman has been through 5 different cancers in her adult life. 5. Anything that they could take out, they took out. Every amount of chemo, radiation, whatever. She even was going through a chemo regimen while she was caring for her dad, who was dying of prostate cancer.
Nice.
Unbelievable woman. But that's not her story. Her story is right before her first diagnosis, she met a guy who she's still married to. And how was she able to love and be loved her whole life, dealing with these medical issues and this burden? And he's so wonderful to her, and she's so wonderful to him. And how could she learn how to love somebody and let that person love her in the face of potentially what was multiple terminal diagnoses? And then that's not even her story. She didn't meet Dave until shortly after she escaped one of the most harrowing 4-year brutal abusive relationships you could ever imagine. And bad, like bad, hospital, you know, whatever you want to put into it, you put into it, but bad. And then I thought to myself, so you do this 4-year relationship, you're in a relationship with the devil, you get out of it, you learn how to open your heart. And then you go through a lifetimes of journey with what you've gone through. And near the end of our talks, she goes, so Dave, I don't know, but every day I just get up, I put my feet on the ground, I figure out how to go about my day. And I'm like, whoa, like there's so much behind that. And every person, that doctor that I was telling you, one of the things he told me first, he goes, I don't have any problems. I love my life. I love my life. That's what he told me. 100 times he told me he loves his life. And finally I'm rolling my eyes going, come on, man, you don't love your life. Nobody loves their life that much, right? Give me something more. And I find out this is a guy who is a doctor digging in his couch for change to put gas in his car to pick up his paycheck. Of course he loves his life. It's just, they're so deep. And so what I really learned about the book is that people are fascinating, and they've gone through a lot, and they're dealing with a lot. And, especially if people are forward thinking and looking out the windshield forward instead of the rearview mirror, if people are just trying to figure out how to get forward each day, it's just a wonderful gift to be able to take a quick look into their lives and interact with them on a real level about how truly fascinating they are. That's the thing I learned the most out of this book, was everybody that I ran into that you could have a real moment with, even if that moment was 2 years of conversations or a 5-minute real moment. People are fascinating. And I didn't know that I really believed that before I embarked on this project. I thought there were fascinating people, but I didn't think all people were fascinating. I kind of believe that now.
Yeah, everyone is a deep well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you afraid to die?
I don't think so. I don't think I'm afraid of it. I think that I'm not looking forward to it. I have too much to do in life that I hope it doesn't happen for a long time. And hopefully by then I'll figure out a way to make it something I look forward to. Right? It's going to happen. So yeah, I one of the people I met during this project said the human brain is not wired to be able to understand its own mortality. Even doctors who deal with death all the time. This was an oncologist, and she told me, she said, Hal, the reason that half the oncologists become oncologists because they want good karma because they're afraid to die. Mm. And I'm like, wow, they're afraid to die. They're afraid they're going to get cancer or die, so they become oncologists for the karma. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. We can wrap our brains around the fact that other people die, but we can't wrap our brains around the fact that we're going to die. And that's an interesting thing. So I think people are afraid of death. I don't know if they're afraid to die. I don't know if we can truly understand that concept.
It is a weird one to wrap your head around, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How might people find you, David?
You could be in the middle of the desert and see some stupid guy running in 115-degree heat down the highway. That'd be me. That they can find me there. No, I'm kidding. They could find me there, but on cycleoflives.org. So all the proceeds from the book go to help the cancer-focused charities and other charities that were chosen by the book participants. And so that's listed in the book. It's listed on the website, but cycleoflives.org. And I do public speaking. I do expressive writing workshops, really wonderful workshops. They're amazing. And I try to help people whenever I can. A lot of information there. And obviously books are wherever books are sold, which I think isn't everything sold on Amazon. So
yeah,
there you go.
I think so. David, this has really been wonderful. I appreciate you coming on the show and being so candid about your feelings around it all and your stories. I think they're important. I think the more we tell these stories, we give permission for other people to feel their feelings and tell their own stories.
And it puts your own life in perspective to realize the true depth of the thought of you never know what people have dealt with or what they're dealing with. And when somebody is being closed off, maybe that's because they've been abandoned at the most desperate times in their lives and they don't know how to open up anymore, rather than they're just a jerk, right? I mean, there's so much more. And so, thank you for giving people a forum. You're a great interviewer, and
Thanks.
hopefully you bring content that you're proud of. I think you are proud of, and your audience does. And so thank you for providing this space for people.
Thanks, David. And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.